Members of TAR get a copy of that MOU when it's
I think all council finance now that's not going to be a secret. I'm going to be good for the community to be aware of what trends are. Yeah. It's a public copy.
So we have to make sure that the commercial system.
Yeah.
We wouldn't expect any other comment from you.
Always
Subject.
Yes. That's the smoothing loan. Remember we yeah. So we haven't borrowed that yet. And that will obviously position as well.
And given that your interest rate is very lower.
Good time.
Right, does anybody else got any other questions?
Financial report or the statement of
I'm
funds.
just going off from what Charlie.
So I'll pay back to Charlie actually.
Yeah.
Continue going through it.
So I'll just pick out some highlights on the, I mean, interest revenue is down. As you mentioned with the loans, the interest rates are down, so bad time to hold money, but a good time to borrow. Our fees and licenses are doing really well. Building consents, fire charges, food hygiene fees, resource consents, they're all very busy, which is nice to see in the region.
So the over budget means that we've potentially received too much?
Received more than we were expecting.
Never too much.
More jobs coming in than going out.
Well, and you can see that with the consents. We're obviously getting more building consents through than we expect.
And I guess a really quick way of looking at, if you look at the green button here, Brenda, it just kind of tells you.
Green is good.
It's good.
Well, I did notice on the recent consents report, I mean, there's 50 something more property consents gone.
Yeah.
And
For the month.
So my initial thoughts around this is that if it's over budget, it means that staff are a lot more busier.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that would be a fair comment. It's very busy.
So what?
So that's up to Harry to manage as the CEO.
Can I just ask a question, Charlie? Under rates, have you got a fix for how many new ratepayers we've got? Eventually.
Well, to an extent, it doesn't make a difference as in how many more properties or divisions have had consents 1 July, because we only rate them from the following 1 July.
That's
And
right.
also, we're still going to be receiving the same amount of rates income. It's just that it's going to be divided up across more properties. So just because we've got more rated units doesn't mean that we're giving more income to council. Yeah, just because that is a little bit confusing. We sort of do a bottom-up budget, so we determine through the annual plan and long-term plan how much we need to collect from ratepayers, and then we go that figure divided by the amount of ratepayers that we've got.
Is that why we are unable to mid-year pro rata rate for new properties coming on?
That's part of the rating act.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a shame, that.
Given the rating of CV or LV.
are the building consents across the board of the area or anywhere?
Look, I don't know, to be really honest with you, Kit.
That's incredible.
It's
It
scary.
is a lot. Yeah, we won't probably see. Well, I mean, they'll be rated, but once the subdivision is done, then they're rated from the following year. Yeah.
And that also doesn't take into account where there's been an empty property and they finally built on, because we have a landowner.
That's
They're
right.
already ratepayers,
Yeah,
but
sure.
the building is actually commensurately greater than that.
Yeah. We've got a big delay in building properties at the moment, haven't we? 2 years before you can go from consent to build.
Oh.
And mostly supply of contractors.
Oh, yeah, and supply of materials.
Yeah, not from the council point of view, from the poor person having to try and get house built.
I heard that there are a number of building projects in Marston shelved halfway through because they could not get aggregate concrete.
They couldn't get what?
Aggregates and
Well,
concrete.
it's not only just aggregate, it's also building materials,
Yeah.
like chipping. There is none.
Yes. Okay, Charlie, what else have you got?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good though.
The other one that's really noticeable is miscellaneous income. Now, one part of that is that 1.4 million of the grants funding for the, the stimulus funding for the three waters. So what I've made the decision to take that out to give you a reflection of how it is if that wasn't received, because it's a negative, it's a net zero thing anyway. So miscellaneous income, once you take that out, is actually under budget by 177,000. So we haven't had much from bailage from our wastewater land this year.
Why's that?
Not sure of the
It was actually a bumpy year for bailage.
Yeah, look, I'm not sure either, actually. I think I'll, we can do a little bit of
I think all the farmers
investigation about whether they're holding it for sale. I'm not sure. I know that last year they might have sold some stockpiled stuff.
Yeah.
That's what I think happened.
Oh, okay.
Before they had a stockpile, so yeah.
So getting rid of the old stuff, stockpiling the new, but then it's, yeah, okay, that's fine.
Can I just ask, Charlie, the Greater Wellington Regional Council recoveries under budget by 132 under that miscellaneous. What does that relate to? Is that something to do with the Greater Wellington rates, or is that?
I think it's valuation recoveries, Amber. I can look into that in more detail and come back to you.
Yeah, it's fairly chunky, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it might be a timing thing, so we'll just have to look at.
I thought the NZTA would be a timing thing.
Greater Wellington, so they, is that the one that they pay us for the commission?
Yes, yeah.
Is that one?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it may just be a timing thing on the timing.
Okay. Yeah.
With regards to the user levies, the transfer station was 41K. Is that because of the increased hours, or?
That's the income from the transfer stations. So
that just means that people are and there's 3 transfer stations at the moment. Yeah, than they expected.
It's a good thing.
Yeah, from a waste minimisation point of view.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
And this wouldn't have captured it.
Yeah, it's running a little bit early. When did they?
This period doesn't cover any of the COVID lockdowns, does it? Or
this is year to date.
This is year
So
to
it's
date.
from 1 July to
1 July, there was a lockdown.
No,
No, it wasn't actually.
Yeah,
It's manual.
So that transfer station one, we've opened longer hours. So if people aren't utilising those longer hours, we're paying out wages and not getting the income. So that could have an effect on that till people actually get it in their head that they're open until 4 and things like that now.
I think also a lot of people had a bit of a clear out during lockdown. So
I know I did.
Okay, so we move on to expenditure. Corporate services, not worth commenting on. Governance, leadership and authority, advocacy as mostly operating cost savings.
So
Not paying us
can I
enough.
just ask a question? So with the spatial planning, the budget for READ, which section of that?
resource management.
That was all budget for.
In the current annual plan, there was budget for that. The spatial plan project is ongoing over the next 4 years. So there's additional funds in the long-term plan for that.
Sorry, that's right.
Another area that's under budget is the economic and cultural and community development, but that's mainly due to that coronary college grant not having been paid out yet. So that's a timing issue.
But if we take that out, we're over budget 105.
Yeah. well,
Then why's that?
Not sure actually, to be honest. Do you know, Charlie, off the top of your head?
Not off the top of my head. I can come back to it.
Yeah, I'll come back to you on that one
Cool.
next time. Yeah.
On the amenities area, we're under budget 39K in libraries. I mean, normally it's good to be under budget, but in amenities, not necessarily.
It won't be by the end of the year.
Okay, so it'll just be a catch up. Yep.
It'll just be a timing thing. Because what we generally do is when we allocate the budget, we unless there's sort of one-offs that we know about, we generally split it evenly across the year. So the spend is kind of even. Each month we're planning on spending 1/12 of our budget, and it'll just be a timing thing. It could be that it's permanent and perhaps we're spending less on city care day works. So city care day works are our people that manage our reserves and our toilets. And so it could be that there are less call outs for that, which is a good thing. The contract cost will stay the same, but usually there's a lot of day works, and I think the team has been working quite hard to get that down. So we'll see further at the end of the year whether that's working or not. I think Bryce will spend all the money he's got to spend.
Confident there.
As with the libraries.
So, is that, COVID was earlier. At the libraries.
Yeah, there's also been a lot more sharing amongst the libraries.
Yeah.
So that does obviously have cost benefits. We're getting some good initiatives from the libraries partnership, the NZLPP. Get what the other P is, I can't remember. So they're providing us with staff, but with those staff come the resources to pay for the extra things. So that helps. And obviously those costs we sort of recover straight away from them. Rental properties, we've had a lot of lease updates this year. So we have gone over budget on the legal and consulting costs for those. But if you look at the rental income, we're 5% over. So we've already started to see the benefit of renewing those or reviewing those leases.
Probably one sort of risk I think needs to be highlighted is around the Wellington water or the water costs. I think water supply, they're expecting to be 4% over budget by the end of the year. Wastewater, however, they're expecting to be 45% or 190,000 over budget. Also, we have a proposal on the table at the moment that we're considering moving some of the stimulus funding from CapEx to planned maintenance, from CapEx to OpEx, something that we're considering at the moment. But that's still a bit of a risk area to find out, I guess.
So what are we getting the information that we need from Wellington Water saying these are the projects and how much they cost? Are they actually telling us the costings?
On each project, the costings?
Yeah.
For the reactive ones, when we asked, we've actually said that any reactive incident that costs 50,000 or more, we want a really good breakdown on that. Because that wasn't their natural position. 50,000 for Wellington Water is quite a, I would say, quite a small amount considering the regional councils that they tend to cover. So we have said that 50,000 for us is a material amount, and we would like more information on that. So
I think it's important to note that a lot of the unbudgeted costs are for emergency works, so which are out of their control, and we need to, if something blows, we need to fix it.
But how many times are they revisiting the same pipe as the program? How many times?
So this is, I don't personally have that data at the moment for you, and this is why with the stimulus funding we wanted to spend more on renewals to mitigate that risk.
Chris, apologise, I think this is more for S's and C's.
Yeah.
The questions that they should be asking.
Yeah, but no, it's definitely still, it's probably, if we're looking at all of our activities, it's probably our highest risk area in terms of financial risk and uncertainty around Wellington, because I think the feeling is we're still not in a position where we're comfortable that the budgets are meeting what is required.
Are we going to get, for the Lake Ferry incident, are we going to get insurance for that, or are we going to pay it?
I think at the moment that's been put in the too hard basket. I think the general consensus is that no.
Well, no, we're not, we're gonna.
No, we're not going to get insurance for it because there was a lot of misunderstanding about communication issues around where the drip lines were and what was communicated to the contractors and who communicated what. Yeah, so it's a bit
Not good.
Is that taking
Not
a
good.
bit of a soft approach from our perspective?
I think it's taking a bit of a pragmatic approach, to be honest.
Well, can you come back,
on
can
that.
that, should that not be reviewed? I mean, if nothing was in writing, they're saying, no, we're 300,000 down the burglar,
Yeah,
because nobody wrote anything down.
yes, yeah.
I mean, that's not a great position to be in.
No, it's not.
It's a question that needs to go to assets and
It
services.
is,
And
yeah.
it needs to, it's his own, it's what.
He is
sorry, it's
completely
quite
own.
a detail.
Well, I understand that, but as far as we're concerned, though, we're simply saying we're spending another 300,000.
Yeah.
From where?
That's a chunk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an expensive chunk.
So let's run it through assets and services.
Yeah, I'm just saying, I just don't have the information.
Yeah.
No,
That's the
I'm
point.
just,
You need to go and get that, provide the
Yeah.
information.
I'm just going that FAR doesn't realise that we're actually up, well, I didn't realise that we're actually up another 300,000.
We also want to protect our legal position.
Yeah.
So obviously we have to consider how that information is communicated.
Yeah. Okay, now what's to stop us from again repeating in the future?
I think that the best answer to that is to ensure that we are asking Wellington Water to improve processes with their contractors, and I think that they've taken that on board. And once again, Ewan will be able to give some assurances around that. But that's the feedback that Charlie and I have been getting through. Charlie and I attend the monthly financial meetings with Wellington Water, where we go through the OPEX and the CAPEX program of works. So we are represented there, and we do ask the hard questions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. No problem.
But this has been sitting there for people for a year.
Yeah.
So just thinking about this 45% over budget by year end, taking into account this incidents. So thinking for next year, do you think we'll be closer to on track with budget or?
That's a very good question.
It's something that we've been going over with them is this the new VA business as usual?
Yeah.
Or are these one-off catches that will start to reduce as we improve our capital renewal program and spend more money, which is perhaps the reluctance to just say yes to moving money from the capital stimulus funding to the operating. Yes, we want to be clear with them that it's not just going to become.
So the tricky thing here is this is a business as usual. These are emergency events that happen.
They are.
And that scale emergency events. So, trying to understand what, the range of emergency events it's going to. So we've got an age network. We don't have the asset condition, all those things are important to do, which is what we're trying to do. So we know we're going to have lots of leaks, we're going to have lots of breaks. So the trick to get the budget right is working out how much we're going to have. Yeah, and that's a tricky thing to do.
So is there any use in having a 10% contingency in the particular?
Can't do that.
budget? You can't really do that.
Yeah, well, yes, we can. I mean, we're relying on Wellington Water to provide us with their budgets, and our expectation of them is that they have done the work that sits behind those budgets, and they have looked at the assets and the condition of the assets and how much maintenance is required, and they've got a program of works that sits behind those budgeted figures, and that's what they've presented for our long-term plan. I think I have some level of concern that that process hasn't been as robust as perhaps I would have expected it to be. So we are still pushing back on Wellington Water around even what they've got in their long-term plan.
And we saw that with the Greytown treatment plant pipe, where
Yeah.
we thought they'd done the robust, but it was only using old data. Okay.
So, just a question with regards to financial. Who's keeping an eye on how much money Wellington Water is spending under their delegated amount, which is up to 2,000? Okay.
So Sorry?
Who's keeping an eye on how much money Wellington Water is spending under their delegated amount? But they can, if they have a delegation of up to 200,000 K. So who's keeping an eye on that?
I guess we keep an eye on it from an overall point of view. It's probably not something that that's $200,000 per
Incident.
per incident.
Yeah.
So once again, it's something that if they have no control over, it's very hard to kind of sort of say to them, well, you can't go over $200,000. They're reporting it all to us.
Oh, cool.
They are reporting it. They report it on a monthly basis. This is part of the meeting that Charlie and I had. So they are reporting those. They give us quite reasonably detailed reports each month in dashboards. So we're all aware of what's happening. Yeah, so there's still a little bit of I'm not sure how developed the maintenance programs of works are for our existing plants, and that's what Charlie and I are still trying, and Ewan are still working with Wellington Water around, because I'm wanting to move some funding from, as I've just mentioned, from the stimulus funding from CapEx into OpEx for planned maintenance, and
I think that's not.
so our question to them is, well, are our long-term plan budgets correct?
Yeah.
Have you got enough planned maintenance in there? So
My concern would sit around the number of times they come back to the same incident. So when they come and there's a leak in the road or a leak at the hydrant, they come and they dig it up and they do a patch repair, as far as I can see. They don't dig deep enough to actually look at the condition of the pipe, or they don't appear to be. So when they have to come back again and again, that's 3 road maintenance plans that they've had to do. And and I think we need to scroll down into that, because maybe they're better to take longer at the first one and replace a piece of that pipe to stop it.
This is a factor of them being an asset management company and employing other companies to do that work. And certainly, though, from Ewan's perspective, that could be raised with them, but it's very much an operational side of things. Very visible to the public.
It is visible to the public, and once again, it's that assets and services discussion really about,
Performance.
performance.
Well, that was the same discussion we had when there was a spill at the harbour, and nobody bothered to fix the Ofcom. They just left it. They didn't have budget to do it. I mean,
Go assets and services. Go for it.
Yeah.
all right.
Okay, so, moving along.
Is that sort of
Last 2 timing items are just that the income NZTA capital is in budget, but that just reflects the capital program being in full swing. And contributions from subdivisions have been strong this year. So,
and that's all around timing,
but of course the contributions goes into
the reserve.
yeah.
It's very hard for us to budget those contributions because we don't invoice the developer until the 224C is issued, so until it's all done, signed off. And sometimes that can drag out for quite some time.
Well, Terror Junction as an example.
Terror reductions in here this year, I think so, and that's been going on before.
They're still doing all the groundworks, so we can still get
Yeah.
Where are we at with Greytown auctions in terms of money?
To be really honest with you, I'm not sure. I don't sort of keep a track, and I don't know whether you've had a rock Charlie see what those subdivisions are. Is one of those Greytown ones the orchards? Possibly is.
The Orchards retirement or the Orchard subdivision? Retirement.
I'm not sure. I just was told there was one in Greytown and one in
Yeah,
Marsden.
they've started work there, haven't they? So I imagine that some of the contributions would be related. And they'd be pretty.
I think it's like the first 14.
Sorry?
First 14 after the Orchard's retirement, but I think they are bringing forward the building of the balance.
Can I go back to the solid waste? Is that what we discussed before and I've missed something, or is that, yeah, I know it's only a very small percentage at 2%, but I'm just mindful that, yeah, we don't want it creeping up.
I've just actually asked one of our administrators to put together a chart of our tonnage this year. It's not in tonnes anymore, it's in kilos, but to compare with the other two districts, because that solid waste is managed as a three districts contract. It is noticeable just from looking at the reports, just glance at them, that we use almost as much as Masterton.
That's sad,
yeah.
So yes.
Yeah, that's been historical, something that we're
Historical, but
drilling down on and trying to find the reasons for. But it's an ongoing problem.
I mean,
And especially as our landfill costs are going to go up, they're starting to creep up, we go up that extra $10 or
and even
$12.
recycling costs are going up because there's less options, fewer options for companies to then, as care itself doesn't do all the recycling, it subcontracts that out. So those are becoming more expensive. They can't send them offshore anymore. So those costs are going up.
Yeah. Okay, moving on. Statement of financial position. Anything in there that you want to highlight, Charlie?
Nothing of concern in particular. Just again, in March we had 38% of our investments with BNZ. That was what Katrina mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
We've just switched some investments to a different provider, so that should.
Any questions? BNZ is the main one. ASB is the other bank that we often use as our other go-to bank. They're the main two that we
It's very difficult at the moment. You try and get the best rate you can, but they're all pretty bad.
So are we seeing a trending down of our current interest expense?
Yes.
We are. Yeah. I just can't remember what it was about 3 months ago, sort of thing. But
So I guess one of the areas that audit have raised concerns about is our capital doability. So let's go to the schedule of capital expenditure. We're up to the 31st of March. We're on track to spend, I believe, everything except perhaps our waters, although our schedule of program of works for water was very much loaded into the last quarter of this financial year. So in our discussions with Wellington Water, they believe they're on track to deliver the CapEx program for the year. So although this shows that, you know, we're not spending our CapEx in those areas, our indications from Wellington Water are that they are expecting to see their full budget this year. So that should actually look a lot better by the end of the financial year.
So just a question around amenities at 27% you carried over from the previous year. So why is that so low in terms of CapEx?
I knew you were going to ask that. Just trying to think, can we think what projects we've got there that can be delivered, Charlie? I'm just trying to go through and think of
Now it's starting to creep, you know, we don't want to carry over
No.
1.7 into the next
No.
financial year.
Look, I'm not sure. I apologise for that, and we will drill down on that and find out what makes it up in the amenity space.
It just struck me as it was quite high. So
Yeah.
these CapEx expenditures,
Yeah.
if they're underspent, they will be carried over to the
Yes.
following year.
Yes, we do carry if a project is finished and it comes in under budget, we don't carry that over. So it's just open projects, I guess, that is carried over.
Katrina, under amenities, would that have the money for the dog pound in there that we budgeted for? Or would that come under council property?
No, it would come under amenities.
Yeah.
So there would be, part of that would be that.
Just having a flick down the list, there's some things that we haven't rental properties, community housing, community buildings, we're not quite up to budget yet, but I understand that there's quite a bit of activity in those at the moment, particularly in the community housing, so it's probably a time issue.
About the IT, so this is the extra firewalls and protection to increase our
Yep.
security related to that. And do you think that you'll just submit budget for that?
We may be a little bit over budget at the end of the year, but it won't be much. It's mainly hardware, actually replacing hardware for computer hardware and stuff. And we are expecting to do an internal review of our IT requirements coming up.
Katrina, just on general debtors, how does that fluctuate? How much does that fluctuate?
Doesn't a lot, actually.
Actually, I had
Should do.
to, when we did the Three Water reform request for information, we got questioned about that sort of, why didn't you put much fluctuation in the debtors? And we just don't, on a year-to-year basis. We run a fairly tight ship on our debtors.
So how much of that amount is outstanding rates, or does that not go into it in a general debt?
Separately listed.
Separate, yeah. So what is it then? 760.
Some of the suggestions that are rates in advance.
Rates in advance is that second line of the 624. So general debtors, there's about 170 of water rates, water excess charges in there, which is something that we're now working on tidying up.
Yeah.
There is some of those sort of timing issues with the resource consent. So some of those invoices were actually erroneously issued before the 224C was signed off. So we just haven't been chasing them. We need to change that process to make sure the invoice isn't issued until that's sign off is. So that's just a process.
Okay, thanks.
Katrina, have you got any other comments?
I haven't got anything else that I think needs to be brought to your attention. Anyone else has any comments? Any questions?
Good luck.
Just on page 19. I love that we're actually 105% over on our grants. I presume that's stuff that came in early.
Page 19, are you looking at the statement of cash flow?
Yeah. So we're percentage wise, we're what?
Is that the grants from?
Yeah, 3,700% above what we expect.
Oh, right.
It's quite
Yes,
impressive.
that's all
So
the
well
Mural. That's the Mural Task Force funding and the grants that we got from that. And,
Okay.
and I think that's not the majority of it.
That's right.
Yeah, because I did look at that. That's a very big percentage, isn't it?
Other than the annual grants that we know about, it's very difficult to forecast and budget for grants because you don't know what's up for grabs until
you grab it.
the new season comes in and everyone scrambles for it.
That's great.
Yeah.
Are we expecting the Tahina Bridge to come into this as well, or is it?
So will that be balance sheet? Pretty sure it will, because we won't own the asset for a year, so we'll do that on the balance sheet. So it won't be in the profit and loss, it'll be in the assets and liabilities side.
Cool.
Yeah. We will eventually own the asset, but it will be well after the project.
So after owning the asset, will we start putting on the service side?
Yes.
Maintain.
So we've had that discussion and no, it's a good discussion, but we had that discussion when we were doing the long-term plan and with the trust that are the Greytown trusts that are doing the bridge. And DOC sets aside, I think it's 15%, which is effectively the depreciation. So we will ring fence the depreciation on the bridge and that will cover maintenance.
Trina will also have property interests, and I don't know how that is reflected. Our asset register.
Oh, yeah, no, when the assets vested to us. Yeah, absolutely, that will come.
And other property interests and leases and leases.
Yeah, so unless it's that would probably come into contingencies, but it's not reflected in the asset register, but it could be in the notes to the account.
It's a tricky one because it's also bolted to a Kiwi rail asset.
Yeah.
So you've got a real mixed bag of
Yeah.
land ownership on both sides.
Access rights.
Had some very interesting discussion with the insurance broker.
It is
Trying to give the full picture of something. So it's a thing that's flipped onto something else that we're not going to own and we.
It confused Darren and that's saying something.
But it's not unusual, that scenario is not unusual.
Oh, it is relatively unusual to attach it permanently to an existing structure owned by someone else. Yeah, it is. It is.
Particularly big Kiwi ground.
And then we want to put it on our asset register. It is unusual, and from an insurance point of view, they kind of go, what are you doing here? But no, that we've covered it all.
Also,
Pretty clear.
the fencing between the private land and the railway is not paid for by the railway, it's paid by the private. So the inside fence is paid for by Fernside.
But that's not unusual to a state highway.
No, it's not. But they're saying, well, hang on, why should we pay for it?
Yeah, there's still a fair bit of stuff that we're working through with that, and Karen's all over that. Will be.
Yeah, Karen.
Add it to your list.
Yeah.
Thank you, Katrina and Charlie.
Good.
The report's just getting better and better each time, and we appreciate all that. Any other final questions from you? We've already done that. So just now moving on to the policy and governance report. So I'd first like to recommend that we receive the policy and governance report, and it's going to Right, Karen, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for asking for my first report to me. It's a pleasure to present it. So this is in response to a few requests from the committee and also some updates that the committee should be aware of. So I'll just go through the matters in turn. If you have any questions at all. So the first item is the strategic risk register. You requested last time. So that's appendix 1. So I'm happy to take questions on that. Just a note as to what's on the register. So really risks that are about or impact on our strategic direction. So there could be significant operational matters that then present a risk at a strategic level to our direction and to our service level. So you will see that there may be some matters that are both on our operational risk register and our strategic risk register.
So can I ask a question earlier on this morning about why the operational register was publicly excluded and the strategic risk wasn't? And I think I gave a reasonable answer, but whether you want to expound on this now or wait until we go to.
So the simple answer is because there are justified reasons for withholding that information in the operational risk register, which is why we put it there, and we can talk about those when we get to that point. But we felt that there wasn't anything within this that we would want to withhold.
Or probably likely to be.
No, that's right. I mean, there possibly may be, but because it is at that governance strategic level.
Did people want to, should we take this one by one and look at the strategic risk register first and then have any questions or answers? I just have a couple of questions. So how did you organise a rating system for the level of risk? Did you have a 10-point sort of process to.
Yeah, it's a good point, and I should have included it in here. It's the same scoring system that we use for the operational risk, so we can have a look at that when we get to that point. But you're quite right to bring it up, and I will add it onto the report so they can go up with the minutes and the report just to see how people do that scoring. So it's effectively looking at, typically the risk analysis is looking at the impact and likelihood of that actually occurring. So quite often when we get these extreme ones, it's actually the impact. So COVID, of course, the potential for COVID resurgence, hoping with measures in place that continued measures that it's not highly likely that it would happen, but if it did happen, then it could have a really significant impact for the country and actually. So that's quite often why those matters are extreme. It's the consequence.
One other question I had was that several months ago, when we first started discussing the risk register, it was felt to be useful to include the dates of changes to risk.
Yeah.
So, where a risk shifts, it would be really useful to not only know whether it's gone up or down, but the date that it's been changes.
Yeah, and we can include that in future iterations. We were basically starting from scratch because the other one was so out of date.
Sure.
And I think it was a mixture of operational risks and security risks as well. So this is, but yeah, we can certainly add that comment in.
It's fantastic to have it here. I know it's been on that, especially
it was necessary and overdue. So.
Does anybody else have any comments around the risk register?
Great to have it in this format, Karen. I think it's really easy to read, and it certainly by the colour scheme there that highlights anything immediately. Yeah.
A question that Harry asked this morning was around where we are in our mitigation, and I think it's fair to say that some of the risks we are quite well down the road with mitigating those. So for climate change, we're doing quite a lot in that area. As we know, it's a particular strategic direction in terms of processes for addressing some of our risks. I think we're at the start, and so there's more to do there. So we'll be regularly updating this reports, and you'll see our progress.
Yes, because there was an alarmingly quite large number of reads on the page. But,
yes, hopefully I've explained that.
Yeah, no, you have explained it well, and actually it was interesting that when you look at climate change, actually went down very well in the last year of what we achieved. So that's why I was wondering about the scores.
Yes.
Whether we might be eligible for a yellow, but
we can certainly consider that, and I'll liaise further with our climate change advisor. But I think it's fairly standard that the impact of climate change is
I'd rather
going to get worse.
So the matrix works, it's got likelihood and consequence. So the likelihood goes from 1 being the lowest, 5 being the highest. So if we went 3 was the likelihood of a event, 5 being a consequence, so it could have a very impactful, and that makes it something like that, the matrix that we use. So
and if you look at it's a red, climate change, slips, hill.
dark scarlet actually.
Yeah. So I think it's legitimate thinking.
some of the things we can't mitigate.
Yeah.
No.
We can do a certain amount, but we can't completely get rid of this. It's always going to be high potential.
Great.
Let's say, for instance, you take an example like a catastrophic infrastructure bridge. And so that would be a strategic risk. The mitigations to make sure we get bridge inspections and checking the internal structure of the bridges being done. That's the mitigation unit. So the impact of the bridge failure is huge, but the mitigation can actually make that risk really low. So that's a sort of combination of things as well. So at the end of it, we'll be satisfied that those things that we can mitigate are being mitigated and mitigate to the maximum possible to reduce the impact of the risk.
Should we move on to the next section?
So next item is a policy review. The committee requested the policies that we have and the due dates for review. So they're included in Appendix 2. Just advising that we are actually undertaking at the moment, I'm recruiting at the moment for a policy and governance advisor. So that person will be able to focus principally around corporate planning, so our LTP work, our plan work, and then the rest of the time will be around policy development. We know that there is a lot of work to do in that area, and so we'll put together a programme of review and we'll report back to the next committee.
So with a quick question with regards to policies, I mean, it's actually, are you going to review and make suggestions on what changes need to be made and then they get ratified through?
The first step is actually going through, and so we have a broad policy register. So this is just an excerpt from that. The date, so just to be aware, the date of review on there in this appendix is actually indicative because sometimes the date's on there and we need to trace that back to where that comes from because, for example, some policies that are made under, that are required under legislation, so some of the plans, some of the policies and bylaws have legislative requirements about when they must be reviewed. So, for example, bylaws have to be reviewed within 5 years of the first date. We have got dates on our bylaws that do not necessarily correspond with that. I think there may have been a decision that actually we want to review it in 2 years' time sooner, which is not a bad thing. So it might look like we're overdue on that, but actually we're not. And once it has been, a bylaw has been reviewed, you've then got 10 years to review it again. So I don't know whether it's prudent to leave the bylaw for 10 years, but that's another matter. So we have to, the first part of the programme is actually going back and checking that date when we actually do need under legislation to review it, and then if it's a council decision, it's perhaps less risk if it was a council decision to review something a little bit earlier than we need to do. So from that, we'll then prioritise what we think the programme should be moving forward, and that's what I'll report back. I won't be able to at that point be able to go into all the detail of what needs to be reviewed, but we'll have a good sense of whether something's really out of date. We know the situation has changed, and then we'll put that up as a priority.
When you prioritise it according to what you see as the major aspects?
For me, legislative requirements, so bylaws and statutory, funnily enough, bylaws and statutory policies and plans. I mean, the finance, largely is okay. I think that reflects, where we've come from in terms of.
Yeah, and I think that the majority of those finance policies are mandatory to review each long-term plan, so they do get done.
Well, I think we have a particular focus on other finance funds, perhaps less so around the administrative type policies. It's a big work programme and we haven't had a dedicated resource until really July came along. So that's effectively what we're picking up now.
It's great to see it all there.
Well, mildly concerning.
It's about work, how much.
Yeah, we shouldn't be scared about knowing the quantum of the problem.
That's right.
Just a minor comment. When I looked at that, I could see the review date, but I couldn't see, because I know some of these you've already actioned, I'm assuming, last year, whether maybe one more column to say action.
Yeah, we'll do that as part of the programme. We'll have a different document as part of the programme, because that will be our document moving forward for all the processes. So it will look different. This was just a cutout, just so that you could see. But we put this together, a couple of weeks ago, so it is up to date. As far as those dates tell us.
That was what I was going to ask. When you start to work on this, can you, when you broaden what you've got here, adding more columns and things like that, can you have one that says legislative date
Yes,
and then the other dates and things
Yeah,
like that? That'd be
absolutely.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I think this is fantastic. Yeah. Apart from being daunting.
just one, but I'm working on that. That's a very recent conversation.
Just out of interest, because I've done my own analysis, there are 65 policies, 66 policies now, because one popped in that hasn't been through there. Yeah, and I've got the adopted dates, amended revised dates and review dates, and I'll send it through.
Just a note that some of those are so old, we don't
Yeah.
actually know whether they're relevant anymore. So
Yeah.
we need to go back through as part of that programme and just weed out what we need. So, and also this is the information that we have largely on our website. And so, you know, internal policies, it's really.
Oh, yeah, the internal policies, we shouldn't be sending out, really. It's not for us to review.
Harry's laughing at me in the background.
I'll just send it to you now.
Find out what he's laughing about.
Right, so, nobody's got any further comments. It's great.
Yeah, okay, so official information and privacy, we haven't reported this for a very long time, and so it's well overdue on our numbers, and our numbers are not great at the moment, and that reflects, I think, a number of things. So they go back to the 1st of July. So during that time, we've transitioned staff members. So we now have a full-time information officer who is responsible for the kind of end-to-end process of receipt of a request to checking it and making sure that things are going out, so all the way through. And we've put together a revised process on that, and we're just about to send that information out to staff, so the staff are on it. There's a lot of confusion around official information and what is an official information request, and that's across the board, not just our council. So quite often we get requests in and people don't know that they're an official information request, and don't necessarily, you know, are not alerted to the process that we need to follow. So that's why we're staff training on that, and we're going to sit down with customer service staff who particularly deal with these requests, just so that they, you know, are aware and ask questions, like that extra amount of training.
Can I ask that training comes to councillors? Because some of the requests we get should fall under the information.
That's right. We're certainly going to send out that initial information to you, and then if you want to have more training on that, then we're happy to give that to you. And that's some of the reason why we've got here 10 requests where there's no response date, because what's happened is that people have received a request and then have responded to it, but it's not been logged in our system that there's been a response. So, and that includes councillors, you know, that because obviously you get a lot of requests from people, so it's making sure that we've got a process and we are capturing all of the numbers. I think because of those reasons, 92 requests is really the tip of the iceberg, and we get an awful lot more. People just deal with them, and that's the difference in the process. Is that when does it stop being, you know, it's just an ordinary, you know, hello, when are my bins being collected? It's actually a request for official information.
Okay.
We don't log it, we don't process it, we just answer it because we know the answer and we can do it straight away. But at some point, further information, further research, discussion needs to happen, and it's at that point that we then log that as an official information request. So you've got all of this customer service stuff that doesn't get recorded. And also within there, I think we've probably included complaints, a number of complaints to come in that kind of are sort of masked as a, you know, a request for information, but are actually a complaint. So we're also working on the complaints process at the moment, just to make sure that we don't any overlap there and look at the process for how we deal with those.
So the frontline staff are pretty important.
Absolutely, absolutely. They're getting that information all the time.
Yeah.
And now we've set up an official information request specific email that then goes to a particular email account, and the information officer, myself, and another officer who also does, you know, when the information officer's away, we can cover. So we've got visibility of that, so we know what's in train. And people can also fill in an online form with our new website, so that then gets diverted. But it's making sure all the rest of the staff know.
Yeah, sure.
Get something in that isn't official information, put it through to the actual email, and then we can monitor it as it goes through.
So how would, just out of interest, how would somebody, if somebody walked into the reception and said, I've just reviewed your strategic risk document. Now I'd like to have a look at your operational risk document.
Yeah. So that particularly would come through to our governance team, and we would be aware it would likely come through to Suzanne and our information officer, and they'll say actually that was dealt with in public excluded. So so there's a good awareness, because we're a small organisation, of who deals with what.
Yeah.
So we are comfortable that it's dealt with appropriately. If it was just somebody phoning up about something that that was bins or whatever. And like I say, it's those key staff. So, for example, our rating officer gets a request in, and she knows what to deal with, that she should be dealing with, and then what she needs to raise up discussion about what information. Because of course, there's also a misunderstanding that all requests for official information should be provided, and of course, there's the very good reason why we go into public here that also apply to requests for official information. So if there's commercial sensitivity, if there's something around our legal position, so we have to be able to apply those reasons and not just send everything out as protecting us as an organisation. So I'm quite confident, that when we get that training in place, and just reminding people what
Is there a generic training program from the GAZ or?
Yeah, there's lots of information. The Ombudsman's actually got a lot of guidance out there, particularly about he's put out guidance books on each of the reasons that you can withhold the information. So there's a lot out there.
That's not what you're making.
No, not at all. And the Ombudsman's really good if you've got a particular problem. You can just phone them up and get some advice. It's good service.
I think we've had a discussion about this before, Karen, but I'm interested to know, when does the banner of Information Act become not contentious, but becomes a barrier for people getting information, and therefore creating a misconception that the council aren't giving them the information?
Yeah, and no, it's a very good question, and like I say, we try and answer those easy questions as soon as you can, as soon as it's there. If you know the answer, just provide it. It's just when it becomes that little bit more, and I think that any regulation is always going to be perceived to somebody who is unhappy about the situation as being a barrier. I mean, there's good reason to have this information, but we all, the stance is you make information available unless you've got good reason to withhold it. There's also misconceptions around that having to respond within 20 working days. So you're actually required to respond as soon as reasonably practicable, but no later than 20 working days, apart from some particular circumstances. So it's about getting the information done as soon as possible. The difficulty is that we're all busy, and it's actually about trying to decrease the amount of official information requests by being proactive, actually having really good comms. And we had a couple of the long-term plan and social plan workshops. We've had really good feedback that our comms have improved so much that people don't need to come and keep asking us things, because we're already providing. And we're also going to be, as part of the employment process, working on our proactive release, so that when you have people who are requesting official information, you then consider, actually, that's quite an interesting topic that other people would be interested in, and then putting them available on our websites. That's the next step. There's issues around that because you're not protected under the legislation. So if you put up information that's commercially sensitive, it's not in response to a procedure, you're therefore exposing yourself.
I'm sure you would never let that happen.
We would never let that happen. So you have to make sure that our processes are right to be able to deal with that process.
Yeah.
So Brett, the other one is often people have got a specific question and they frame it so loosely that it means we would have to provide huge amount of information and time to answer it. So trying to narrow down what it is that what's the heart of the issue they want to read, trying to iterate it. honestly, particularly people fishing expeditions, that's everything they can, because I'm not quite sure what they're looking for. Yeah. And so that's probably the hardest thing to
Yeah, and that's quite often the point where we would be refusing information on the basis that it actually requires too much effort. We don't have the capacity to do it. But before you make that decision that you're going to refuse the request on that ground, you have to be able to go back to them and say, look, we can provide that information if you pay, or actually you've got the opportunity to narrow down exactly what it is that's provided in the legislation.
Do we often charge?
Rarely.
Very
Really, and
That's my experience.
yeah, and we use the Ministry of Justice's guidelines, which they've provided for central government, but most, I think all local governments actually use those guidelines, and it's basically first hour free, and then, you know, however much per hour. It's not very much money at all, but it really is just, I don't even know that it covers your costs.
I think that costs more to administer.
Yes, it does. But that's the price.
Can be a deterrent.
Well, it can be, and it can in terms of people who, you know, where it is unreasonable, but, you know, it goes hand in hand with that ability to withhold or refuse their requests.
In case of serial requesters.
No, and that's the point that I want to come on to, because there's a really high bar in the legislation for its requests themselves that you're able to withhold on the basis that they're vexatious, or, you know, to come, what comes within that is usually, you know, repeat requests, but it's the request, not the requestor. So this legislation provides the ability for people to ask for information, and that's part of our, you know, democratic representative democracy, and it's about transparency and accountability, and people are entitled to ask. And so I'm happy to do that analysis around, you know, are there particular requesters? Because I think if there are, then it's a case of maybe sitting down with them and saying, you know, how can we provide you a better service, you know, that we can do that doesn't impact on our time, but also does what you want to do.
Or actively encourage them to come to committee meetings.
Absolutely. Deal with things in a different way, because I don't think people actually understand the impact it can have on staff resources when we're such a small organisation. So I'm happy to do that, but it's not about outing people, you know, it's not appropriate. I mean, I'm not saying that that's what, you know, the community are asking for, but I think there has been common misconceptions, like, let's put proven, you know, names up on of people who are, it's not about that, people are entitled.
No, and I think we also want to try and eliminate the number of, you get the original request and then you get the answers back, and then from that you might get 10 more requests coming through. And if we can stop that, that helps save officers time and is probably less frustrating for everybody.
Yeah, I don't know that we actually suffer from that. I'm looking at
I don't tend to see
these guys often get, you know, a request for financial information. And I think we do such a good job in providing the information, and probably more than the information that's requested, because we can do, you know, you will find this helpful as well, but people don't tend to come back about those particular matters.
We have had in the past.
Yes, I can imagine.
We're also very good now at pointing out where this information is available to them already. So we'll say, as per our annual report on page blah, this is available to you and this is the figures. So then maybe they'll look at the annual report before they ask their follow-up question and don't come up with it.
And the website certainly make it easy. A whole lot of people about how easy the website administration everything for more information.
And certainly, just from what I've seen with spatial plan and LTP, everybody's been very complimentary about the communication and the level of knowledge that they can delve into if they're interested. So,
It's a very good foil at the meeting saying it's all there online. We are not hiding it.
so just, I think we're happy with that, maybe move on to customer service.
Yeah, just a point about their training for LIMS as well, that we've got a number of people trained to be able to provide LIMS. We know that LIMS present quite a significant risk if we don't provide information, or provide the incorrect information in terms of, you know, negligence claims that fall around that. So moving on to customer survey. So we are now in position, now we've got some draft. They are draft, but I don't anticipate indicate that the new performance indicators will change significantly. So I'm confident about now for a service provider to be able to do a customer survey. I am going to go back to MLB and offer them the opportunity if they have different methodology, because that was really our major concern around that in terms of landline use. If they are able to do that, then you know, we will consider them as a potential provider. Otherwise, we'll look at other providers.
Just a question, have you shortlisted other?
Not on this point. I wanted to actually get our information together, but there's not, you know, there's a handful of providers that we
Can we look,
Just in terms of, you're confident we're ready for the next annual report. So just in terms of briefing, to doing the work, to getting results, have you got any indication?
Yeah, so I wouldn't want the survey to happen until after the long-term plan process, because I think it would be quite skewed if we did that.
After the 30th of June?
Yes, so
Next year.
we discussed this time, we talked about that previously, and that's what we were going to do last time. It was going to be in July, so we carry out in July.
How does that fit with our audit requirements?
yeah,
October, September. So we can have, yeah, so we had the time frame last time that was based on carrying out the survey in July, and then they'll be able to report back in effectively a 6-week period.
But doesn't the survey then relate to a different period to that what the annual report is considering?
No. So what we have to do here, we have to use current performance indicators, not the new ones. So we have to have questions on those. What we also wanted to do was to be able to ask questions that covered the new ones, so that we could have a baseline. So there will probably be additional questions to what we've already had last year, previous year, to cover effectively all places. So we're not losing a year on the new.
I'm just have some concerns around timing, and particularly if you haven't already interviewed the other providers, then that could easily.
Well, but I don't see it as being a difficult process, and we now can get onto that. Yep, we'll get onto that straight.
Now, I assume that this is purely operational, but it'd be nice to see them, to see what information they're going to give us as governance, what questions they're going to give to us with regards to oversight. Quite nice.
Could you expand on that?
The question set that's going to be asked, whether you know, what we're going to see out of it within the annual report.
Yeah, well, we'll work up with any new questions, and we can put that around councillors so they can see those. I mean, alternatively, we can carry it out during, you know, before July, but I just think we'll have skewed results if we do that. That was the reason why we wasn't going to do that last time.
I think there was some really firm comment from the auditors with regard to having that done by the 30th of June.
The worst comes to the worst, we can do our own survey. I mean, I'm not saying that that's, you know, recommended, but we do have the ability. I mean, what we've got is that we have a customer survey. If we are running the same questions, then it's something we can uplift. And we can do that, you know, through our own website. And we had talked about that in the LTP, about conducting a full external survey every 2 years? 3 years. And then in the intervening time, carrying out our own survey. So we have that. Other councils do that, it's not unusual.
Yes, as we. Well, we can do that for you.
Internal surveys?
No,
So if we can,
Yeah, so yeah, there was some confusion at the last audit on the timing of when that survey needed to be done. And that's why we've clarified in this long-term plan very specifically how frequently that external survey will be done, but it needs to be done for this audit. Yeah. So
if we going to do exactly the same questions, because my understanding was that we were going to change the questions to make them more relevant. We're going to go back to doing the old questions. then we've delayed.
One of the other ones,
At all.
no, one of the one was methodology used. They were still using phoning people at home. That
We're
is,
talking safety questions, so
Well, we'll look at
Sorry.
questions.
We're not trying to say that the old in our B survey had a whole lot of information that wasn't just the KPIs, right? So there was a whole range of questions. And so what all we need to do for this is just simply ask the questions that relate to the KPIs, which are essentially customer satisfaction.
But the new KPIs.
And
The current KPIs
Yeah.
for this year, and then some additional ones to come with
Yeah.
proposed
Yeah.
KPIs.
to make sure it covers.
so
the
we're
whole
not
thing.
doing the big NRB thing. But we've got to ask the same thing.
Yeah.
We've got to ask the satisfaction.
Yeah.
questions.
I think for clarification, and we were phoning people using landlines.
Yeah, I understand that, and missing a sector of our community.
Yeah,
Yes, I understand that, yeah.
So I think our new method is possibly providing it online and.
Combination of online and landline and mobile phones, just to make sure, because the issue was that it was heavily skewed to the senior age bracket and not capturing.
But I
So-
understand that, but I thought that the questions we were asking before had some not so relevant, and that some of those questions, the reason we were looking at it overall was A, to get the demographics right, but B, to get the questions right that were actually relevant to our situation today, not something that was designed 20 years ago and we've just asked the same questions, everything. And I thought that was part of the hold-up.
But the problem is, Pam, is that we're still using the same performance indicators that we have done for the last 20 years. So we have to report back on those performance indicators. We didn't change them for the last the last long-term plan. So the previous long-term plan. So we've got at least 6 years worth of that, and probably long-term plans.
How do we go about?
Well, we are changing them for this for the next long-term plan. So that's why we want to try and, we still have to do the survey and ask the questions for these ones, but we want to try and incorporate some questions that give us a baseline for next year, so that we don't have to wait a year. But and we may be able to have an overarching, and I need to go down and have a look at them in detail, but we may be able to have an overarching question that satisfy both, because it'll be around, what do you feel about our open spaces? That will cover both last performance indicators and next performance indicators. But there are some specific ones that we have in there as well for the new ones, so there will be some specific questions.
Because I think going back, we would remember better, 2 or 3 years ago, there was concerns about the aid questions, certainly the methodology. And I think that's the direction you're coming from, isn't it?
There was some concern about relevance of the questions in the way we do things today rather than how we did them 10 years ago. The KPIs might be the same, but the actual wording of the question skews what the answer can be sometimes. So
there are issues with the wording of the questions.
Well, and I have concerns that a provider would just dosh out the same old thing every year and clip the ticket, which I understand they do with another number of councils. So I'd certainly want quite a big influence over their provider. They haven't tried, they haven't, for example, said to you that would be uptake across all demographics by using different methodology. They should be as a provider.
Yeah.
You expect the latest.
Yeah.
Methodology.
But it's a matter that we will need to see what providers are out there and are there. Because I think it's only appropriate that we do get back to NLP, and I have advised them of the previous decisions and why we haven't contacted them, but they may be able to provide a different service. So I think it's appropriate that we do go back and ask them and costings around that, and then we'll see what else is available.
agree,
Just the same
Karen.
as we would with any other ordinary contracts that we carry out under delegated authority.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, we've got to go back to maybe to ask them quote and things like that. Yeah.
Okay, so if there's no other questions.
Thank you.
Very good.
And, well done, exceptionally fine report.
Thank you very much.
Policy and governance.
Or policy team, as I think that was referred to by Alex.
Team it.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so let's,
We don't do those.
we're still actually,
Oh, the actions items.
so, I'd like to receive the finance audit and risk action items report.
Yep.
Seconded by Brenda. All of those in favour?
Aye.
Sorry, where is that?
Aye.
I just received the finance audit and risk action
Oh, yeah,
items report. So you're in favour?
thank you.
Okay. So I think for this, I'm assuming everybody's read it. So if you want to, if you've got any particular points or to get your commentary around.
So those ones, the points of any action, they can now be removed, obviously.
Which
Well, the action for the catalogue of the policies alongside the due dates and things like that, they can drop off.
that drops off
Yeah,
automatically
next time.
Meetings are actually.
Katrina, the item 10 on there, which is the second to last one, that's on the community, citizen community centre. Is that, have you got a sort of a date for that? Will that come through next month?
There's the community centre, the picking over the project. I spoke with Bryce this morning, it's very nearly finished, very nearly.
So are we going to have overspend on that? Is that?
I don't think
I don't think
it's planning on having any other.
Okay.
Oh, right.
I think initially, I think it will, yes, but we're just waiting for next, but we're just waiting for the final because it's so close to being finished, and then we'll be able to close this action item off and indicate whether there was an overspend or not. My understanding from Bryce is that there won't be. There were some concerns early on in the project, but I think they've
Called up.
worked
The
way
reason
through
community
those.
concerns as well.
Yeah.
That grant is on behalf of the community
Correct.
centre. Any overspend is not our
It's on
responsibility.
there,
Yeah.
Oh, I thought we had some liability.
I thought on the car parking and stuff.
No, they reworked the budget, so my understanding is the original budget covered X, Y, and Z, and they realised that they couldn't necessarily deliver that program of work, so they went back and revisited what the scope of what they were going to do around it to fit it within the budget. My understanding.
Okay, any other comments or questions from anyone?
With regards to number 9, I think our intention was it not? It might be somewhere else on another action item to actually be reporting or putting the number of Laguna requests and to be actually reporting on numbers and content and similarity of requesters. Are we going to do that, or are we just going to?
That's what I'll report next time.
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay. So moving on to item C1, which is the operational risk register. The general subject of each matter to be considered while the public is excluded. Reason for placing this resolution in relation to this matter on the specific grounds under section 48(1) of the Local Government Official Information and Meetings Act 1987. The passing of this resolution are as follows. I don't know that we need to read that. So we'll take it as read and just. So can I remove it from there? Read that one, second. All in favour?
Councillor